Good evening and welcome to Royce Auditorium, families and friends. This evening's program is a performance we hope you will enjoy, A Christmas Carol. The author of the book, Charles Dickens, was a great English writer. Among his other famous novels are David Copperfield and Oliver Twist. Dickens came from a family of 8 children and lived most of his life in London. His childhood was dismal, and food was often scarce. In fact, his family was so penniless that poor Charles worked in a shoe factory when he was our age, 11 or 12. His memories of this job were so bad, he seldom spoke of it. School was a place he attended, off and on. Actually, his mother didn't like it when he did attend school because that meant his family would not have had the money he would have earned. Needless to say, he never finished school. Charles Dickens had such abundant energy that he often took long walks. He came to know the streets and alleys of London better than any other person of his time. As a result, he based his stories on what he saw around him and often included his own family members as characters. In the 1840s, when he was desperate for money during the holidays, he wrote Christmas stories. One of these was A Christmas Carol. This evening's program offers you the musical adaptation to this traditional Christmas story. We are fortunate to have the original score written in 1951 by Mrs. Eloise Johnson. Mrs. Johnson was the past president of the St. Cecilia Music Society. We would like to take a moment to honor Mrs. Johnson's memory for this wonderful work. We would also like to extend our appreciation to Mr. David Ellis, who wrote the score. And we would also like to recognize Mr. Wright McCarther for his energetic help with the choir. Along with Mr. Samir Jarudi, who was conducting the City High Orchestra. And let's hear it for the City High Orchestra! We are also grateful to the Music Society for the honor of performing on this stage. And now, dear audience, please enjoy Mrs. Johnson's and our gift to you, A Christmas Carol.
Marley was dead. He died 7 years ago, this very night on Christmas Eve. Scrooge and he were partners for many years. Yet Scrooge never painted out old Marley's name, and there it stood above the warehouse door. Scrooge and Marley. Tight-fisted Scrooge was a squeezing, wrenching, grasping, clutching old sinner. Hard and sharp as flint, secret and solitary as an oyster. The cold within him froze his old features, nicked his pointed nose, shriveled his cheek, stiffened his gait, made his eyes red, his thin lips blue, and he spoke out in a grating voice. A frosty rime was on his head, his eyebrows, and his wiry chin. No one ever stopped him with a gladsome, "How are you?" No beggars implored him, or children asked him what o'clock it was. Even the blind men's dogs would appear to know him, and when they saw him coming on, would tug their owners into doorways and up courts. But what did Scrooge care? It was the very thing he liked, warning all human sympathy to keep its distance.
Once upon a time on Christmas Eve, old Scrooge sat in his counting house, with the door open that he might hear his home approaching. It was cold, lighting in the morning, every
shutting up the counting house had arrived. Scrooge took his melancholy dinner in his melancholy tavern, having read all the newspapers, beguiled the rest of the evening with his banker's book. He went home to bed. The yard was so dark that even Scrooge, who knew its every stone, was fain to grope with his hands. It was fact that there was nothing particular about the knocker on the door, except it was very large. Then let any man explain to me, if he can, how it happened that Scrooge, having his key in the lock of the door, saw in the knocker, not a knocker, but Marley's face. Marley's face. Scrooge was not a man to be frightened. He looked up again and saw that it was a knocker. So, having his hand on the key, he turned it sturdily and walked in. He lit his candle and fastened the door. He walked across the hall and up the stairs, slowly too, trimming his candle as he went.
Up Scrooge went, but before he shut his heavy door, he walked through his room to see that all was right. He had just enough recollection of Marley's face to do that. Sitting room, bedroom, lumber room, all as they should be. Nobody under the table. Nobody under the bed. Nobody in the closet. Nobody in his dressing gown. Quite satisfied, Scrooge closed the door and locked himself in. Double locked himself in, which was not his custom. Thus secured against surprise, he took off his tie, put on his dressing gown, slippers, and his nightcap. And he sat down before the fire. It was a very low fire indeed. He was obliged to sit close to the fire to feel the very least sensational warmth from it. Yet that face of Marley, 7 years dead, came up and swallowed the fire. Humbug, said Scrooge, and he walked across the room. After several turns, he sat down again. His glance came to rest upon a bell, which as he looked, began to swing. Soon it rang out loudly. So did every other bell in the house. Go, cease! And was followed by a clanking noise deep down below, as if some person were dragging a heavy chain across the floor. The cellar door floored with a booming sound, and he could hear the noise much louder on the floors below. Coming up the stairs, coming straight towards his door, what came through the heavy door and passed through the room before his eyes? Marley's ghost!
How now? What do you want with me? Much, much. Who are you? Who are you? In life I was your partner, Jacob Marley. Mercy, why do you trouble me? Mercy, why do you trouble me? Why do spirits walk the earth and why do they trouble me? It is required of every man that his spirit should walk among his fellow men. If that spirit goes not forth in life, it is condemned to do so after death. Doomed to wander through the world and witness what it cannot share, but must share on earth and turn to happiness. I wear the chains I forged in life. I cannot rest. I cannot stay. I cannot linger anywhere. My spirit never walked beyond our counting house. And weary journeys lie before me. And this time of year I suffer most. Why did I wander as with eyes turned down, and never raise them to that blessed star? Were there no worlds to which its bright light uplifted me? Hear me, my time is nearly gone. You will be haunted by three spirits. Look to see me no more. But for your own sake, remember.
When Scrooge awakened, it was dark. He remembered Marley's ghost had warned him that he would be visited by the first spirit when the bell tolled 1. At length the hour began and Scrooge counted the chimes.
A quarter past. Half past. A quarter to it. The hour itself and nothing else.
It was Christmas again, but it was evening, and the streets were lighted up. The ghost stopped at a certain warehouse door. It was the place where Scrooge had worked as a young man. There was old Fezziwig, his kind employer, and Dick Wilkins, his friend. The housemaid, the baker, the milkman, the boy from over the way, and the girl next door. Into the warehouse they all came because it was Christmas Eve, and old Fezziwig had decided to have a Christmas ball.
When so Fezziwig bless his heart, I hear them saying again, "Go home, my lads, it's Christmas Eve, there'll be no work tonight. Let's clear away for the ball. Here comes the fiddler and all. Oh, hilly-oh-ho, oh, hilly-oh-ho, it's Christmas, Christmas Eve."
Scrooge watched all this, remembering everything. Why was he filled with sadness when he heard them give each a Merry Christmas as they parted for their home? What was Merry Christmas to old Scrooge? Out upon Merry Christmas, what good had it ever done him? Scrooge turned upon the ghost of Christmas past and wrestled with it. Scrooge pressed on with all his might. The spirit, strong yet, repulsed him. Exhausted, Scrooge found himself back at his old bedroom and sank into a deep sleep. Awakening in the middle of a tough snore and sitting up in bed to get his thoughts together, Scrooge had no occasion to be told that the bell was again upon the stroke of 1. He got up softly and shuffled his slippers to the door. The moment Scrooge's hand was on the door, a strange voice called him by name and bade him enter. He obeyed. There stood a giant, glorious to see, who bore a glowing torch, and held it up, high up, to shed its light upon Scrooge as he came peeking round the door.
I am the ghost of Christmas present. I am the ghost of Christmas present. Look upon me. Spirit, conduct me where you will. Touch my rose. Scrooge did as he was told and held it fast.
The room, the fire, the ruddy glow, the hour of night had all vanished. The giant and Scrooge stood in the city streets on Christmas morning. The giant went straight to the dwelling of Bob Cratchit, taking Scrooge with him, holding to his robe. On the threshold of the door, the spirit smiled and stopped to bless the home with the sprinkling of his torch. There was Mrs. Cratchit, in a twice-turned gown, brave in ribbons as she prepared the Christmas dinner. She was assisted by the young Cratchits, who danced around the table. Later from church came Bob Cratchit, with Tiny Tim upon his shoulder.
Such hustle, bustle in the kitchen. The goose is roasting sage and onion gravy is hissing hot. Potatoes boiled in apple sauce. The pudding, boiling too. Oh, such a feast on Christmas Day indeed. Oh, such a feast on Christmas Day. A Merry Christmas to us all, a Merry Christmas to us all. God bless us everyone, Tiny Tim, the last of all. A Merry Christmas to us all, a Merry Christmas to us all. God bless us everyone, Tiny Tim, the last of all. La 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 la.
But the whole scene passed off with the words of Tiny Tim, and Scrooge and the spirit were again on their travels. Much they saw, and far they went, and many homes they visited. It was a long night. The chimes were ringing 11:03 at that moment. Scrooge looked about him for the ghost and saw it not. The bell struck 12. As the last stroke ceased to vibrate,
Scrooge remembered the prediction of old Jacob Marley, and lifting up his eyes, beheld a solemn phantom, draped and hooded, coming like a mist along the ground towards him.
Ghost of the future, I fear you must lead on, lead on. Will you not speak to me, Spirit? Let us go.
The phantom moved away, and Scrooge joined it again. They came to Scrooge's counting house. Scrooge turned towards the window and looked in. It was an office still, but not his. The furniture was not the same, and the figure in the chair was not him. The spirit moved away, and Scrooge joined it again. They came to an iron gate, a churchyard overrun with grass and weeds. The spirit stood among the graves and pointed down to one. Scrooge crept towards it, trembling as he went, and read upon the stone of this neglected grave his own name, Ebenezer Scrooge!
No, spirit, oh no, hear me. I'm not the man I was. This is a fearful place. Leaving it, I shall not leave its lesson. Trust me, I will honor Christmas in my heart, and I will live in the past, the present, and future. The spirit of all things shall stand within me. Heaven and Christmas time be praised for this. I say it on my knees.
Holding up his hands in one last prayer to have his fate reversed,
Scrooge saw an alteration in the phantom's hood and dress. It shrank, collapsed, and dwindled down into the bedpost. Yes, and the bedpost was his own. The bed was his own. The room was his own. Best and happiest of all, the time before him was his own to make amends in. He had been sobbing violently in his conflict with the spirit, and his face was wet with tears. Hearing church bells ringing, he ran to the window, opened it up, and put out his head. No fog, no mist, clear, bright, stirring cold, golden sunlight, heavenly skies, sweet, fresh air. Merry bells! It was Christmas Day! He dressed himself in all his best. And at last got out into the streets. He went to church and walked about. Watched the people hurrying to and fro. Patted children on the head, questioned beggars, and found that everything could yield him pleasure. He had never dreamed that any walk could give him so much happiness. He became as good a friend, as good a master, as good a man as the old city knew. His heart laughed, and that was good enough for him. 'Twas always said of him that he knew how to keep Christmas well. May that be said of one and all of us. As Tiny Tim observed, God bless us, everyone!
Christmas Day, it's Christmas Day, the bells are ringing merrily. A Merry Christmas to us all, God bless us everyone. The bells do ring and the bells do sing, such a joyous day, halloo-hallay. It's Christmas Day, oh it's Christmas Day, halloo-hallay, halloo. Christmas Day, it's
From past years to stand in their seats and join us in this last song of Christmas Day.